Welcome to the Understanding RIOS webinar presented here by Perry Johnson Registrars. I am Tony Kropinski. I am the environmental specialist here at Perry Johnson Registrars. I'm also lead auditor to ISO 9001, Quality Management System, EMS 14001, Environmental Management System, OSAS 18001 for environmental health and safety, and R2 and RIOS. So we're presenting today from Perry Johnson's headquarters here in Troy. It's a beautiful day today in Troy. I hope it's lovely wherever you guys are at. The audience for today's meeting is a diverse group and of recyclers, auditors, and consultants. And I hope that I can answer your questions that you have about RIOS. And we'll have a little bit of a question-answer session a little bit later on towards the end of the presentation. So let's get started with a little bit of an overview. Today's session is going to run about an hour. We'll shoot for about 45 minutes, leave some time for questions. And we'll be going through the benefits of installing a RIOS management system, the breakdown of the standard. We won't be able to go through all the details of the standard, but we'll get kind of an overview and a good feel for the standard. Also, take a look at common management pitfalls that auditors run into and companies that are putting RIOS into place run into, and common nonconformances that our auditors come across in the field. Lastly, we'll be going through the certification process. Here at PageR, we have a stage 1, stage 2 process and a 3-year certification cycle with surveillance audits. We'll be just talking a little bit more in detail later regarding that, how that process takes place. And lastly, be answering some of your questions towards the end of the presentation. So let's get started. What is RIOS? RIOS is ISRI's recycling industry operating standard. And it essentially integrates quality, environmental, health and safety management systems that it's designed specifically for the scrap industry. So you can get all these under one umbrella, get your quality, environmental, health and safety. You don't need a large assortment of the other standards like the ISO 9001, 14001, and OSAS. It kind of incorporates all those into one. So the goals of RIOS is to help those scrap recyclers achieve measurable goals of continual improvement in their QEH&S performance. So the RIOS benefits break down as bringing health and safety performance under control. Making sure that we're dealing with our risks and hazards responsibly, getting controls in place to not allow those risks and hazards to influence our employees. Also, integrating the quality management system and EMS requirements, thereby eliminating duplication and improving efficiency of your system. Also, you want to engage your employees with a very active, living and breathing system that will allow your employees to understand, the health and safety performance is important and vital to the business, and thereby getting engaged employees that are going to ultimately increase your bottom line, decrease employee turnover, which we'll talk about later as one of the major management missteps, essentially. Additionally, with a well-implemented system and as the system matures, problems get decreased, you mitigate potential issues. You have reduced insurance costs that come along with the RIOS benefits as time passes and your system matures. Along the same line with triple bottom line companies where you're dealing with financial benefits, you also have environmental benefits from the RIOS standard, and then your social benefits like social outreach, enhancing public perception of a company that's doing the right thing for both the people, the community, their employees, and the earth. So you'll have better community relations because of it. So let's see. Just give me 1 second. My computer's kind of freezing here for a moment. Let's see if I can get this to. There we go. Okay, so additional RIOS benefits. Monitor and improve product quality. That's the part of the ISO 9001 standard that's integrated. Increases customer satisfaction ultimately and confidence that you're going to deliver a quality product. Delivery time, making sure you control your quality processes throughout all your processes at the facility. The other benefits for environmental is allowing you to keep on top of environmental compliance and legal compliance that decreases your environmental risks and costs ultimately. Improves health and safety practices and risks and costs associated with those. It's also going to improve your neighborhood and legislator and regulator relationships, giving them improved confidence that your company and organization is doing the right thing. And the big part of these standards, obviously all the ISO standards, R2 and RIOS, are to ensure that your organization is moving forward and sustaining growth through continual improvement. You want to boast your efficiency. All companies are looking to draw what they can from their employees and improve efficiency and ultimately profitability. So you don't want a disengaged workforce. Nobody wants that. The standard is going to empower your employees, especially RIOS. It's asking of them what they need, right, in terms of health and safety and getting feedback from your employees so that you can all work towards a common goal and increase productivity ultimately. So the continual improvement is essentially established by this plan, do, checked, act model, this management system model. This is historically derived from the scientific method all the way back in 1620 by Francis Bacon, where you have observations that take place, you observe something happening, you hypothesize and see, well, why is this happening? And go to experiment so you can find out the root cause essentially of why this problem is occurring. And then draw some conclusions from whatever data you're getting from your experimentation. So that's the basis of the plan, do, check model, sometimes called the Denning Circle, established by the father of modern quality control, Edward Deming. So this model's been around for a while, and it's obviously effective, and it's the root of almost all the standards that we deal with here at Perry Johnson. So the first part is the planning requirements. You want to obviously define what your footprint is for your quality, environmental, health, and safety system, and how to improve your system. Make changes that are going to be lasting, systemic changes, and plan for those things, planning for success. The second part of the model is the do, and that's implementing and actually doing what you say you do, whether it be training with employees, communicating effectively throughout the organization from the top down, listening to the employees on the floor, allowing them to engage with the system and make changes. Operational controls that we put in place to mitigate potential environmental health and safety issues, and preparing for emergencies and disasters. That's a big part of this to do, so you can get in proper training and resources allocated so that you can do what you plan to do. The third part of this model is the checking and corrective action requirements. You want to monitor and measure and get some data, quantifying things so that it's more powerful and something that you can use and put to work to uncover what the problems are. And you obviously need to establish a baseline of data to then draw conclusions and see where you need to go. So it's sort of the rudder to the ship, steering you in the directions you need to go. Along with the checking and corrective actions, you have nonconformances and corrective and preventative actions that need to be put in place so that you can uncover the root cause and fix issues and actually start acting upon them, the issues you find, to correct them. And then lastly, as a part of the checking, you want to perform internal audits. Audit your system. You should have, in some smaller facilities, it might be 1 or 2 members of the staff that's engaging in the internal audit, or there might be a team of internal auditors. Making sure that they're trained properly to conduct the internal audit, that they're not auditing processes that they're involved with, and ultimately that's to check the system, make sure it's working efficiently and effectively, and that your planning didn't go to waste, and that you've implemented what you've planned. And that's the gist of the auditing there. So lastly, acting on it, this is where management review requirements come in, several inputs to the management review, which we'll discuss a little bit later in detail. But ultimately, the management review should be a time to act on problems that are uncovered, to see the benefits of the system, things that are working well, but ultimately to then begin the planning process again after seeing where you're at. General requirements that kind of play into this PDCA model are general requirements like the scope, what are the boundaries of your system, and the general infrastructure. And that's all centered around the policy that the organization comes up with, and that's the policy, which we'll talk about, and that's addressed in the standard. What are the requirements for the policy? Should just basically be the groundwork and lay out the central plan for how the organization is to operate. Now, I guess what we can think of an organization without a management system is a ship without a rudder. It really doesn't have a direction. And what the RIOS will do for you as an organization is to really streamline processes, identify what you do, what activities you do, and see how they interact. And a set of interacting processes is used essentially to implement and set the policies and goals for the organization. So connecting your processes, see how they interact, what are the inputs for each process, what are the outputs, and how do we control the processes so we're more efficient effectively. That's the goal of installing a QEH&S management system. So let's get into the standard a bit. Section 1, General Requirements of the RIOS Standard, talk about scope and application. So the management system shall be maintained in paper or electronic form. So again, it's your choice how you decide to document the system. There's a lot of companies that are moving towards obviously the electronic paperless systems. Those are not without their problems. You want to make sure that you do your research and make sure the system works effectively in terms of revision numbers and keeping obsolete documents from getting out of your system, which is the point of the management system essentially, is to ensure that those documents don't get out. But do your due diligence, because I've seen some systems that don't work as effectively as the organization thought. But when put in place properly, it can be obviously a powerful tool for organizing the documentation of the management system. So what shall be included is a description of the scope of the system, essentially your boundaries of the system, core elements of the system, and elements really can be taken as processes and other inputs into the system, and how they interact. And essentially what you should derive from that is understanding what you do from a high level, seeing how the processes interact, and then directing to related documentation that allows for controls of the system. So section 1.2.1, management structure. So senior management shall appoint a QEH&S management representative. So we want to ensure that the system is established, implemented, and maintained in accordance with RIOS, and they should be reporting to senior management on the performance of the system on a regular basis. And that's generally occurring at management reviews, but it can be done more regularly. But it's important that the senior management appoints someone who is not already taxed with their daily jobs, that they have the time, resources, financial resources, and the authority to actually get the system established, implemented, and maintained properly. And that's one of the major management issues that is commonly run into, is that we're appointing someone who doesn't really have the resources and authority to get the job done effectively. So what I just talked about, resource facility, senior management shall ensure that the necessary resources, personnel, financial resources, and the facility, including equipment and technology, is available for effective operation of the management system. And this is all about good communication between the appointed MR and the top management, making sure that the communication is there to articulate what resources are needed, and making sure that fundamentally that the training is there and the understanding is there during the planning process of what needs to be achieved. That's a critical element. So section 1 continues with document and record keeping control requirements. We need to establish written procedures for document control and record control. It's pretty straightforward. Procedures shall ensure that documents are established and maintained. You need to approve them prior to them being used. They have to be regularly reviewed, revised, updated, and changes have to be tracked and identified between revisions. They have to be current and available. We don't want obsolete documents being used. Legible and dated revisions and identifiable. Removed from use when they are obsolete. And their distribution is controlled, especially from external sources. Procedures shall ensure that records are established and maintained legible. That's important because a lot of the, in some facilities they have like forklift records that are kept by hand, and sometimes they're not all, completely legible. So ensuring that they are actually legible and usable, that's important, and traceable across the different processes and easily retrievable. They should also be stored efficiently so that they're protected from damage or loss. And the retention times on the documents, or the records, shall be established in writing. That needs to be documented to articulate how long these records should be kept on hand. Section 2 gets into the policy. Right, so senior management shall establish a written policy for the QEH&S, and the policy shall be appropriate to the operations. You want to describe what you do and make sure it's accurate. It's a big part of the planning process to assess your systems, your activities, what you do, and write it so that it's appropriate. And you want to make sure that you're honest with yourself to evaluate potential environmental impacts and health and safety risks as well. You want to include in the policy a commitment for compliance with legal requirements and other requirements, customer and product requirements, for example, industry guidelines, and you want to make sure that you have commitments to customers that are well established. Additionally, in the policy, you want to ensure that you have a commitment to continually improve, to prevent workplace injuries, and the policy generally should be the framework for the goals, right? Setting goals that are achievable, realistic, and they can be tracked and monitored effectively. Additionally, the policy should articulate how customer satisfaction is to be achieved, and your commitment to customer satisfaction, including additionally commitment to prevent pollution. And this policy should be something that's living and breathing within the organization. It should be made available to the public and understood by the employees at the facility. I've been to a very, from small to large facilities where it's just a piece of paper, the policy is just a piece of paper hanging on the wall, and nobody really lives and breathes the system. And in my mind, that's not really the point of the standard. The point is to get it to be a living and breathing system, to engage your employees. They'll ultimately be more productive because of that. And that's the point of this section 2 here, is to make sure it's communicated and understood by employees. What does it mean to them, and how does it affect the work that they do? And that's a big part of it, I guess, the training that should be put in place to allow employees to understand how the system works together. And as I said, it should be made available to the public, suppliers, customers, contractors, and other interested parties as well. And this policy should be reviewed on a regular basis and amended if necessary, if there's changes within the organization or other directions that the organization has decided to go in. So Section 3, planning. The organization shall identify a footprint for the QEH&S. And the footprint, essentially here, it says the overview of the RIOS member companies, right, to get a baseline for the QEH&S. It provides an assessment of the relationship between companies' activities, products, services, and potential risks and impacts, and the expectations and requirements of interested parties. So it's kind of tying everything together, giving you kind of the boundaries of the system. And there's, I guess, two subcomponents that are going to make up the footprint, essentially. So that would be here with environmental impacts and health and safety risks. The organization shall establish a process to identify the actual potential environmental impacts and health and safety risks of their activities, products, and services, considering both routine and non-routine activities, including emergencies. So that's an important point, that you don't want to just say what you do, but you also want to take a look at what could potentially happen from non-routine activities that are occurring at your facility. You want to make sure you control for those activities. Additionally, organizations shall include those activities, products, services that they perform or provide, and those that are performed for them or provided to them by contractors or suppliers. So it's not enough just to control your activities. You want to control activities, product, services that are from an outsourced person or persons or companies. So controlling outside sourced activities is important as well. Lastly, the organization shall determine the significance of their health and safety risks. And this can take, I guess, many forms, but generally the form you see, well, I see it in, would be in the form of a matrix that's outlining your environmental health and safety, environmental aspects and impacts, and health and safety risks and hazards, and having a rating system that allows you to determine what are the significant environmental impacts and what are the significant health and safety risks that we need to control for. And you can get a scoring system that allows you to kind of pull that information and get some quantification of the level of risk that the facility or activity or process is giving. So the other part of the footprint, Section 3.1.2, legal product and other relevant requirements, has to do with pertaining to legal. So you have your environmental health and safety on one end, and then you have your legal. So RIOS member companies shall establish a process to identify and have access to their legal requirements, product and customer requirements, and other QEH&S requirements associated with other commitments they may have. So it's important that the RIOS company, a member company, not only look at legal requirements, but establish an understanding of what other requirements they have to comply to. Okay, Section 3, improvement planning. Senior management shall ensure that written QEH&S goals are established. So we need to take a look at our system, get some baseline data that would be helpful in establishing where we're at currently. And then you can go forward and say, all right, here's some goals that we can readily achieve, and then start to plan for how we're going to achieve those goals. So the goals may be specific to a particular function or may apply to the entire organization. They can be small, dealing with one process, or all-encompassing throughout the organization. Additionally, the organization shall consider their technological options and financial, operational, and business requirements, and the views of interested parties in setting these goals. And we want to pull in other resources, take a look at what are the requirements for the business for the operation of the business. In addition, interested parties that we can set some goals to help keep improving our system. So along with the goal setting, what's important is to ensure that responsibility is assigned, someone is assigned or a department is assigned to tackle that goal and achieve the target goal. In addition to assigning responsibility, time frames also need to be established for achievement. So when are we going to achieve this goal? And I think that's the most challenging part of the process, is to establish reasonable goals and a reasonable timeline for achieving those goals. Lastly, the goals should be measurable and quantitative where appropriate, and amended as necessary when changes are made within the company. So whenever you have changes, new processes introduced, that process should be looked at, for its environmental health and safety risks, impacts, and assessed, and control mechanisms can be put in place, and then further, evaluating that new process to see if we can derive some goals or establish some goals that will allow us to continue to improve our system throughout our time. So, question: true or false? The following goals meet the RIOS requirements. So we have a goal here set for reduced total amount of product received that goes to landfill by 5%. So we want to reduce that by 5%. And the task responsibility is assigned to Jason Smith. So Jason's the lucky holder of this goal. So true or false, does this goal meet the RIOS requirements? Now, just give you a second to think about that. But going back to what we already said in the previous slide, right, the goals need to be measurable, so we're okay there, as long as we have some baseline data to say where we're at. So where are we at? What does 5% mean? Is it achievable? And then we assign the responsibility. So everything looks good there. Now what we also need to take into account is what sort of time frame are we looking at? So the answer to this question is false. It doesn't meet the goals of the RIOS requirement because we do not have an established time frame to achieve this 5% reduction of material going to landfill. That's why we need to set time frames. Okay. So moving on, section 4 is dealing with implementations and doing what we say and what we planned, and 4.1 deals with training. So competency of your staff, individuals at the facility, competency needs to be based on education, training, skills, and or experience. The organization shall establish processes to determine and implement awareness training requirements to ensure that personnel are aware of several different things here. So they need to understand their role and responsibility, how do they fit, what are their boundaries, and what are they doing, right? And are they competent to do that? They also should have communication regarding how they contribute to the achievement of the policy and the QEH&S goals. And this is a common, from my auditing experience, this is a common misstep or gap in the system where they may understand their job function very well, but when you ask them about what are the company's goals, specifically goals that relate to their activity or process that they're dealing with, they really don't have a clue of what it is they should be shooting for and how to achieve the goals that are set by the company. So that's a communication issue, and for it to be a living and breathing system, you want to ensure that the policy is living and breathing in your facility and the people that work in your facility, and that they're aware of the goals so that they can achieve them. They can't achieve them if they're not aware of them. So additionally, moving on, the importance of conforming to the QEH&S policy, processes, and procedures, and the importance of the environmental impact and health and safety risks associated with their work activities. And that again is good training, regular training that will allow them to kind of establish an understanding of what their job entails in terms of environmental impacts and health and safety. And that's got to be a constant input into their training. Is, you know, how does their job affect the environment, and what sort of health and safety risks do they encounter on a daily basis or regular basis during their job. Also, the employee should understand potential consequences of departure from operating procedures, processes and requirements, and also they should get the benefits of improved personal performance to quality environmental and health and safety performance. And it goes back to what I just said, essentially with communicating what their roles and responsibilities are. Also, you know, training them to what are the company's goals, what goals should they be involved in trying to achieve and reaching towards. So go back to just effective training and good communication. So RIOS member companies shall verify the effectiveness of training, and they should keep records of education, training, skills, and experience as well in hand. And just to speak about the effectiveness of training, you know, once training is put in place, there should be some timeline put in place where, you know, the standard doesn't specify how to do this, but there should be some time frame where you're going to go back and look at whether that training is actually effective in doing what it was supposed to do. So moving into internal communication, the process shall include communication regarding the QEH&S management system and its structure, importance of environmental health and safety risks, related environmental health and safety information. And many companies have been at, there's some bulletin boards and in high traffic areas that help communicate these risks, or there's regular daily meetings that allow employees to be engaged and up to date with health and safety information and environmental information as well. Also, and I think one of the critical elements of internal communication is helping them understand the legal requirements and the consequences of not meeting the legal requirements. They don't have to know all the details, but they should understand, and it should be known internally and communicated internally, that we have these legal requirements, and those are critical elements to staying in business. So lastly, as a part of the RIOS standards, arrangements should be made for employees to give consultation and feedback about the health and safety process. They should be able to have a forum that allows them to discuss and help in the planning process and in the control process for mitigating potential health and safety issues. So making sure that their voice is heard is only going to help engage the employees further and increase growth and productivity. So along with internal communication, you've got to be communicating with your customers, and this communication should include or shall include product information, customer inquiries, contracts, order handling, including changes to orders, along with customer feedback and complaints and assessment of customer satisfaction. This obviously derives from the QMS or ISO 9000, where we're listening to what the customers are saying, we're getting feedback from the customers, and then we're actually doing something about it. What action are we taking to ensure that customers' requirements are being met, and that our customers are happy customers. Supplier communication. We also want to make sure that we articulate to our suppliers coming on site or our requirements for the QEH&S system. This should be purchasing requirements to suppliers prior to purchasing. Additionally, we should be communicating with contractors regarding our requirements for the QEH&S, and additionally interested party communication should be also carried out. External interested parties, you should be addressing receiving documentation and responding to QEH&S related communications from external interested parties as well. So moving on to section 4.3, operational controls. Organizations shall consider their operations and activities associated with the QEH&S footprint and goals and establish processes and written procedures to ensure that they are performed in a controlled manner and that they are appropriate, that the appropriate production equipment is available. So the footprint, as we talked about, established environmental health and safety risks and hazards. We get, through rating of significance, we understand what are the significant aspects and impacts for the environment and health and safety risks. After we establish an understanding of what our risks are and our potential impacts are, we need to have controls in place to mitigate those potential issues. And so we should establish processes and written procedures to do so. So this would involve, safeguards on equipment, protective equipment for employees, eyeglasses or hearing protection for loud noises. If they're dealing with sharp objects, ensure they have appropriate clothing or coverage or gloves, ensure that the mitigation of health and safety risks is carried out. So customers, the organization shall establish requirements, processes, and written procedures relevant to production and distribution to ensure customer and product requirements and goals are met, and that the consuming facilities are qualified to receive product. And just doing your due diligence there to ensure your customers' requirements are established, the lines of communication are open, and that we have some process that ensures that we're meeting our customer requirements. So this process shall include product tracking, when necessary, controls of customer property, and product shipping, delivering when the responsibility of RIOS is one of the responsibilities of RIOS member companies. So RIOS member companies shall establish requirements, processes, and written procedures to ensure source control of raw materials. Want to ensure that anything coming into the facility is of good quality. Having a receiving procedure when materials are entering the door, and then maybe a checklist. But you can take various forms of how material will be assessed. And sampling that raw material that comes in the door, and doing some quality checks to make sure it's what you're getting your requirements that you asked for. This process shall include, the ability to qualify and select suppliers and ensure raw materials from suppliers meet the requirements, and records should be kept of this. So I want to ensure that we're getting material from suppliers that meet our requirements. And that goes back to the planning process and understanding what we need to meet our customer requirements and product requirements. So organizations should establish requirements, processes, and written procedures necessary to ensure contractors adhere to the QEH&S management system requirements. So there should be good communication and understanding of contractors that are working on behalf of the company. What are the requirements of the QEH&S system when they come on site? So implementation also deals with emergency preparedness. Organizations shall establish processes to identify the potential for and respond to incidents, accidents, and emergency situations. So the organization should, during the planning process, identify potential emergency situations and put controls in place for when they occur to allow for mitigation of potential environmental hazard or environmental impacts or health and safety risks. So in order to control that, procedures should be developed and the organization should test the procedures on a periodic basis to make sure that they're effective and controlling the risks associated with emergencies that may arise. So we want to have these tests obviously before these emergencies arise, And the procedure should be reviewed regularly to ensure that they're still relevant to the organization's level of risk. So on to Section 5, checking and corrective action. 5.1, monitoring and measurement. The organization shall establish a process to monitor, measure, validate, and record characteristics of their operations that are key to ensuring effective QEH&S performance, achievement goals, and product conformity to product requirements. This shall include monitoring of the management system and goals. Measures may be qualitative or quantitative in nature, and monitoring data shall be analyzed to demonstrate the effectiveness of the management system and assess continual improvement. And that's the point of this section. Section 5 is to make sure we're effectively monitoring our system, getting data. Again, it doesn't have to be quantitative data, it could be qualitative data as well. But quantitative data is very powerful. And when you can get it, you probably should get it to allow you to see where you're at and allow you to measure, right, once you and validate the things you do, ensure that they're being documented and recorded appropriately. So part of the checking process, right, we want to make sure our supplier qualifications are in line with our requirements, and we want to, as we talked about before, want to verify incoming raw material to make sure it meets requirements and ensure our source control is effective. The results of verification shall be considered in supplier qualification and selection. So we need to have that feedback loop. So when we're verifying our raw materials, we need to constantly assess our current suppliers and new suppliers that are coming on board and say, are they giving us what we need? And if not, corrective action should be taken to rectify the situation. So environmental health and safety compliance. This is another part of the checking process. The organization shall establish a process to monitor compliance to applicable EH&S legal requirements and other requirements to the RIOS member companies. So during your planning process, you should be establishing what is your footprint, both environmental health and safety, legal requirements, and then monitoring compliance to those legal requirements and other requirements. This generally takes the form of some matrix that will have legal requirement, maybe responsibility of who's monitoring that requirement, some of the inputs into keeping that requirement, such as a wastewater permit. We may have testing requirements or sampling requirements that need to be taken on a certain timeline. So that should be captured somewhere so that we can stay on top and monitor compliance. And then due dates for renewals of permits and things of that nature. So that would be a way to stay on top of your compliance. But it's not just legal, it's just that you have to stay on top of both legal and other requirements. And when auditors come on site, they're not doing a compliance audit. They are doing a conformance audit to the RIOS standard and auditing to this part of the standard right here, which is ensuring that you have tracked your legal requirements effectively and other requirements effectively and are in compliance with those requirements. So true or false, a question for you here. RIOS member companies need to only identify applicable legal requirements in order to meet the EH&S compliance review. So do something about that. So the answer here is false, and the reason why is because this question here says RIOS member companies need only identify applicable legal requirements in order to meet the requirements. Remember back to the clause here, legal requirements and, oops, sorry, wrong one. We want to monitor legal and other requirements to the RIOS, whatever the RIOS member company subscribes to. It's just not legal. It's maybe the R2 requirements if they're R2 certified or other standard requirements among other types of requirements, customer requirements, and things of that nature. Okay, so kind of running short on time, so I'll kind of move a little bit quicker here. Section 5, checking and corrective action. It's continued here with maintenance and calibration of monitoring equipment. This is pretty straightforward. We got to make sure that the equipment we use in the facility is calibrated, is working as it should, and working accurately. So calibration records should be maintained and kept. And along with calibration, you want to make sure you're doing appropriate maintenance for equipment throughout the facility, keeping up to date on equipment to ensure that it's running effectively. So true or false, scales used to weigh incoming material must be calibrated periodically to ensure accuracy. So this one should be pretty straightforward, I guess from my point of view. But yes, that is absolutely true. We need to ensure that we have our scales calibrated periodically. Okay, so one of the last parts of the checking is identifying nonconformance, or nonconforming product, nonconforming processes, and generating corrective and preventive actions to mitigate those nonconformances and fix them systemically so that they don't reoccur. So the organization shall establish a written procedure to address and eliminate the causes of nonconformances and potential nonconformances. And so when we do uncover nonconformance, we need to figure out who's going to deal with it, assign responsibility, and we need to do a thorough investigation of the actual root cause. What actually caused the nonconformance? And it's not enough just to say a very simple sentence where, like, we didn't know, we didn't understand the requirements. We should go a little bit deeper and understand what was the actual cause of this incident. Was it isolated? Was it something that's going to reoccur? Then we want to address the nonconformance to prevent a repeat of this problem, right? So to be effective, we want to identify nonconformances, we want to document them, do root cause analysis, and then make sure our root cause and corresponding corrective action actually fixes the issue. Nonconformances and preventative and corrective actions shall be documented and reported. So control of nonconforming product. The organization shall ensure that products which do not conform to product requirements are identified and controlled, and to prevent unintended delivery and use. And that one's pretty straightforward. Just making sure that we have some system in place that allows individuals interacting with potential nonconforming product to identify it, label it in some way, segregate it so that we don't unintentionally deliver that material. Nonconforming product may be corrected, released to the customer with concessions, or used for other purposes. Nonconforming products shall be identified and subsequent actions recorded. We need to record what it is we're doing in this process. So management system audits for the QEH&S, and this is regarding internal audits. You need to establish a written procedure to periodically evaluate your system. The management system should obviously be in conformance with the RIOS provisions and requirements, and the way to do that is to periodically check the system. So it's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it. You know, making sure you have a good audit schedule, understanding what your activities and processes are, and getting properly trained internal auditors that can effectively audit your system and making sure they're independent. They're auditing independent of the processes they're involved in. The procedures shall address audit scope, considering relative importance of QEH&S processes, and results from previous audits, schedules, responsibilities, and reporting of the results. And then again, this important point: auditors shall not audit their own work. And one important point here is that results from previous audits should be considered. If you had findings in a particular area, it's a trouble spot. It should be targeted again for subsequent internal auditing to ensure that you've corrected issues and nonconformances that were documented or effectively taken care of to mitigate potential reoccurrence. Okay, so let's see here. I wanted to kind of move forward here. This just talks about, again, the full system internal audit, which includes conformance to RIOS, proper establishment of QEH&S management system. Audit procedure addresses the audit scope, processes at the facility, results from previous audit schedules, responsibilities, and reporting the audit results. And this is just the next part is just in the bold here is just a couple questions, and we're going to just skip that for now just because we're running low on time and I don't want to get through this here. All right, so Section 6, the last section of the standard, has to do with management review, and I'll just kind of bullet point what are the important points here. So senior management shall have a management review at least annually, but the frequency is if you want to do it more frequently, that's fine. Just want to make sure that the management review is recorded and that you're addressing all the required inputs and associated outputs. So some of the inputs here, right, audit results from your internal audit and third-party audits should be considered and talked about in management review. Feedback from customers and interested parties should be discussed and action should be taken. Progress on goals and making sure that we're meeting our time frames that we establish and the goals, again, are realistic and achievable, and changing if they're not. And understanding that we may not be able to meet all of our goals and that we're constantly continuing to improve, reassessing our goals and maybe establishing new goals. Another input, right, should be status of preventative and corrective actions, making sure we're dealing with our problems, follow-up actions from previous management reviews, and changes in the system that could affect your QEH&S management system. Lastly, recommendations for improvement. Three main outputs of management reviews should be decision and action taken, and that's important. We want to take action on the issues that are at hand, and we want to make sure that we allocate resources needed to accomplish if we have any issues or goals that we set. We want to make sure we have resources allocated properly and effectively to carry out the goals and the planning that we've done. And lastly, product improvements. All right, so just kind of briefly go through some common management pitfalls, and we talked about some of them. The first one here deals with resource allocation. It says the RIOS company, the certified company, does not empower the individual management representative with both responsibility and authority. And we talked about this a little bit before, but it's ensuring that when we appoint a management representative, we're giving them the tools they need, both time, financial resources, training resources, and that's a big one because that's encountered quite a bit where the MR is not quite up to speed on the standard. So there's training courses available. Obviously, PGR offers a RIOS course online, which I'll talk about in a second, that we can get our MRs trained and ready to deal with the standard effectively and understand their roles and responsibilities. Management often assigns a person to drive the certification process, but they're busy doing other jobs. And that's, again, the time allocation. Do they have enough time to reach the goals that are set, the QEH&S goals that are set for the organization? So it's resource management. Lastly, management hires an incompetent consultant. I've experienced the results of an incompetent consultant several times on audits. You got to make sure that you vet your your consultant thoroughly, understand what you want from them, establish time. We want to have established timelines for getting things done, and it says here, right, moral of the story: have an interview list of points you expect as deliverables from your consultant. Consultants aren't cheap. You want to make sure you understand what you're getting for what you pay, and interview accordingly. Constant turnover in an organization is going to hurt the organization's progression and continual improvement. And if there is constant turnover, there should be a root cause analysis performed to see why this is happening and how we can retain employees. Company does not have competent personnel to write procedures that meet the exact standard requirements. Now, procedure writing is quite a bit of an art. You know, particularly with the management systems, you want to write just enough to get you what you need to make sure your system is living and breathing and effective. But writing too much could get you into some hot water occasionally. If you're writing into procedures all these things that you need to do that aren't prescribed by the standard, but things that you feel you need to do, that if you can't fulfill those activities that you're saying that you're required to do, and then you're going to run into some issues with findings and nonconformances during the audit. So, you know, consultant can be very helpful for writing procedures and getting those in place for you, but it is definitely an art. Definitely additional pitfalls have to do with technical expertise to develop legal and other requirements. Again, outsourcing to consultant would not be a bad idea if you're not familiar, but there's a lot of online resources that can be utilized to help understand what your legal requirements are. So we talked about a little bit about the amount of time invested in root cause analysis to ensure that corrective actions are effective. So it's not enough just to identify the problem. We have to actually mitigate the problem, put some corrections and corrective actions in place, and then see if they're actually effective. So we do have webinar, actually some older webinars on root cause analysis, corrective action process. If you do have any or need for additional resources, you can contact me, and those are available. Lastly, the company doesn't want to invest time or money to effectively train employees, and this is a common issue. And it's important, obviously, that when you're in your planning phases, that whoever you charge with being the management representative is effectively trained to carry out their tasks. Okay. So top findings, we'll just run through them quickly. Operational controls involving hazardous waste, universal waste regulations have not been considered. Lack of labeling or incorrect labeling, particularly with batteries that don't have a start date for accumulation. They're not segregated properly in some cases. With 5.2, nonconformances, corrective action process, a lot of organizations don't fully understand the corrective action process and how detailed you need to go to really mitigate problems from recurring. Document matrix is not up to date. So if you have a master document list, it can be quite cumbersome to keep up with, but that's a common problem that's not kept up to date. So having a streamlined system and regularly checking that is important. Operational controls for approving suppliers is a common issue, as is incomplete list of legal and other requirements, and EH&S hazard identification as well. So the last two here, emergency preparedness, having incomplete list or not identifying all your potential emergencies, situations that could arise, lack of testing, lack of spill kits. If you have mercury at the facility, having a mercury spill kit on hand, those type of issues are common. And improvement planning, objectives are not quantifiable and measurable. So making sure those objectives are meaningful to you, you can collect data and use that data as a tool to make changes. So the standard is easily integratable with R2 and 14,000, and when we do integrate those standards together, we can help reduce overall costs and time on site if they're effectively integrated. So essentially, the steps for a company that is interested in RIOS certification is to get and allocate resources to training to RIOS requirements, both staff and internal audits, creating the documentation or integrating it with existing system documentation, and then implementing the RIOS requirements. You've got to conduct internal audits, we want to conduct compliance evaluation, legal and other requirements, and conduct review of system based on inputs from internal audit. Once we're through that, right, we want to contact PJR certification body, and we can get you all set up to complete your stage 1 or S1 and S2 stage 2 audits and address any nonconformities and get you certified. So the breakdown essentially for the stage 1, stage 2 is the two-stage process. The stage 1, you have on-site documentation review of the QEH&S management system. and essentially evaluate your readiness of the organization to move to stage 2. Stage 1, the auditor will be on site, on the on-site documentation review, mostly just looking at documentation, not really talking to too many employees or doing too many employee interviews. They might get on the floor a little bit. Definitely take a walk around the facility, see where you're at, see what activities fit to your scope. And then at stage 2, that's more of the implementation phase. The auditor will come in and see that you have actually implemented your system, and that occurs approximately 30 to 75 days after the initial stage 1 audit. And they'll audit your entire QEH&S system for stage 2, and any nonconformities that arise or gaps in the system that arise need to be resolved prior to issuing the certificate. And that's, again, you're going through your correction, your immediate correction, root cause analysis, finding the problem, what actually caused the problem, and then having a mirrored corrective action to resolve the issue systemically so it doesn't reoccur. After you go through your stage 2, approximately a year later, you'll have your surveillance audit if you're on a 12-month cycle. There are 6-month semi-annual surveillance that you can choose if you want your system to be monitored more regularly, but typically it's 12 months. After the stage 2, you'll have your first surveillance audit, and then a year after that, you'll have your second surveillance audit. And these are partial system audits. The auditors can only look at part of your processes, won't interview as many people, there won't be as much time on site, but do a thorough review of those processes and not the entire system. And then at the end of your 3-year cycle, you'll be up for recertification, and on-site audit is conducted right prior to the 3rd anniversary of the initial certification. And then your certification, once you're recertified, your certification surveillance audits will continue as before on a 3-year cycle. So if you're interested in our RIOS training or R2 training, we do have courses available online at pgr.com. You can also just click on the training on the far right of the website, and there will be a link to the R2 and RIOS Lead Auditor courses. This course is accredited by ISRI. It's an 8-hour online course where you can work at your own pace, save your progress, and then come back when you need to. And once the certification is complete, then you'll be a certified lead auditor to RIOS. So certification is completed, provided to those who pass the exam at the end of the course. And the fee for the course is $295. And now questions, and because we're running late on time, what I'll have you do is just, there's a question bar to the right of your screen. If you can type in any questions you have regarding RIOS or any other standards that we can address, I will email you. I have everybody's emails that attended the webinar today. I will respond to your emails kind of as an FAQ, send you kind of a PDF document with the answers later. And if you have any other questions that you want more detailed or want to have a conversation regarding, just give me a call here at the office. There's my contact information, and or email me at apropinski@pjr.com. I thank you guys for attending today for the RIOS webinar, and thank you and have a good day.